In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarrett.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for listening to another episode of Veracity Hill, where we are striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. It's a pleasure to be with you here back in studio at the Defenders Media offices, where we do the podcast from week to week. But it's not just that I'm here on another Saturday. It's that last week we were at a Defenders Media seminar called Reliable, Can You Trust the Bible? And we were at a Faith Covenant Church in Wheaton, Illinois. And so it was a great opportunity that I had to speak on a number of different topics and to be joined by Ted Wright, who is the founder of Epic Archaeology, and you can check out more about what he does there at epicarchaeology.com or .org. You can go to either one. And it's great to have Ted on our team. So he's joined the Defenders Media Alliance, which I've got to update the website and include his logo now. I'm so pleased to have him on our team. All right, so we're back in the saddle here in the studio today. And last week's show, if you hadn't had a chance to listen to it, was my interview with Ted talking about the importance of archaeology and apologetics. We called the episode Digging for Truth. And a lot of great things that we had to hear from him, including one very fascinating update. And now I don't know how I should say this. A provocateur of new ideas, and I'm a bit skeptical when people start talking about Noah's Ark, because there's supposedly. Oh, we're doing the live stream today, by the way. Daniel, good to see you there. Thanks for following along here. There's an update on Noah's Ark, and I'm a bit skeptical when people talk about Noah's Ark. But if you go to the episode, you listen to Ted, he says that there's been this new discovery. There's a wooden structure buried in ice, and it smells like animal urine, and it's made of pitch. There's pitch there. It's very fascinating. He's letting us draw our own conclusions, of course, but at this point we just need to be cautious, I think. I think we need to wait. It might end up being like the Shroud of Turin, for example, where it's just kind of like people end up making their own decision about what that structure could be. So anyway, I thought that was fascinating, even though I'm tend to be cautious and skeptical when people claim they found Noah's Ark. So that's very interesting. So if you get the chance, go back and listen to that episode. It was a fun time live there at the seminar. Today's episode, though, is on nationalism, and what that means and what that entails we'll get to momentarily. But before I do that, let me say hello to Chris, who is joining us here in studio. He was off last week. You were away at Colorado, and I missed you at the event last week.
Hello.
So yes, how was your time in Colorado?
It was very productive. It was good, too. They have mountains out there, too.
They do.
So, yeah, it was nice to study under the shadow of the mountains and just sit down and get stuff done for a while.
I'm a bit jealous that you had that opportunity. So
it was good.
Well, it's glad to have you back. I missed you last week. I felt like I was running around a little bit, and so I missed you. But
I heard it was a great show.
And as you can see here, people that are watching the live stream, we've got cords all over the place.
Yes.
It's a little messy, and that's because we took a lot of the equipment with us to the event last week, and so we're still working on getting things set up here. Yeah, oh gosh, I'm looking at the live stream now. Boy, look at all those cords.
Yeah.
So hopefully next week we'll tidy up a little bit for you. So, but also glad to note that the live stream is working this week. So We're glad to have that going. So, all right, if you'd like to have your voice heard on today's episode or any episode, you can give us a call. The number is 505-2STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. And you can also participate in our texting plan. It's totally free for you. All you do is text the word Veracity to 555-888, and I'll be able to get your text message during the week or during the show even. I'll get that program loaded up. So if you've got a comment or question and you want that submitted, just text the word Veracity, Veracity, to the number 555-888. All right, I think that does it by way of announcements. For those of you that are curious about the videos that we were recording last week, we're still working on those. I think we had a little bit of trouble with the audio, so we're going to see what we can do. Chris is now back in town, so he's the main video guy. So he is the bomb. And they call him Merlin for a reason because he works magic. That's what he does. Okay, so we're going to be talking about nationalism. And at this point, I wanted to bring on the guest for today's show, Keith Giles. And so he is the author of Jesus Untangled, Crucifying Our Politics to Pledge Allegiance to the Lamb. So, Keith, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Hey, Kurt, thank you so much for having me on. I'm very honored and blessed. Thank you.
Yes. Now, first, before we get to talking about the book, let me ask you a little bit about yourself and your bio. So from what I've read here, it says that you're a former pastor who's abandoned the pulpit in order to follow Jesus. And what you ended up doing was you founded a church where 100% of the offering is given away to help the poor, specifically in your surrounding community. Tell me a little bit about your story, your background, and what led you to doing this.
Yeah, so, golly, I guess about maybe 27, 28 years ago, I was a younger man, licensed and ordained as a Southern Baptist pastor right after I got married, and I've served as everything except a senior pastor. I've been associate pastor, music minister, children's pastor, everything. And we moved that was in El Paso, Texas, and then we moved soon after that I moved to California. I live in Orange County, California. Mm-hmm. And then my wife and I got involved locally with the Vineyard Church and helped to plant a church out here in Tustin. I'd never done that before. That was really interesting. My wife and I were doing children's ministry and compassion ministry, and that was ministry to the poor in the community, serving at families that live in motels here in Orange County, as well as just senior home ministry and the homeless and all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. And we did that for about 3.5 years. Okay. And then we started feeling God calling us for our family to plant a church. And we thought, that sounds great. So we prayed about that. We felt like, okay, God, we'll do that. And then after we said yes to that, then the next thing we felt like God say was, I want you to start a church that gives away everything to the poor in the community and doesn't keep even a penny for rent, salaries, flat screen televisions and all that stuff. Yeah. And so that was exciting to me. I couldn't imagine, like, if someone asked me about, hey, tell me about your church, and I said, yeah, I go to a church that gives away everything to help people in the community who are struggling financially, and we don't keep anything for ourselves. That was exciting to me and my wife, and we thought that's great. But we didn't immediately know how to pull that off.
Sure.
So because as you can imagine, I mean, what we were thinking was, well, I still need to eat and take care of I have 2 little boys.
Yeah, exactly.
I have 2 little boys at the time. So, like, how do I pay and Orange County, by the way, is second only to San Francisco as one of the most expensive places to live. So It's not cheap, So anyway, as we just prayed about that, the answer that eventually came to us was that I would just get a job like everybody else.
You'd be a tent maker.
And yeah, it's like a tent maker, exactly. Although I don't make tents, I'm a copywriter for an in-house marketing agency for what turns out to be the world's largest global technology distributor on the planet. You've never heard of us, but if you have any kind of device, electronic device, or even software in your home or in your possession, really great chance it came from us. Okay. Anyway, so we have an in-house marketing agency, and I've been doing that for about 10 years.
Gotcha.
And so we started this church. So the other end of the equation was that's how to pay the bills. But the other end of the equation was where are we going to meet? So then we decided to meet in homes. So that's what we started doing. We just met initially at our house, but now we've started rotating different houses every weekend with the people that end up coming with us and or that have found us. Really, they've just kind of found us. So that's what we do. We've done that for 10 years, and so every penny that comes into the offering goes to either help families that are living in these motels. There's one particular motel we've adopted in Santa Ana. We've also started doing ministry right down the street from me is Angel Stadium. Okay. I can see the fireworks when they go off every time there's a game and the fireworks go off. I can look out my window and see them. It's a free show.
Mm-hmm.
But what's also right next to, in the shadow of Angel Stadium, is what we've been calling Tent City, which is, it looks like a shanty town, literally. There's just probably, I think the count was about 300 or so people that are homeless, that are living in tents all up and down the riverbed right there, right in front of Angel Stadium. So we've started, our church has started going out there, just really, it's relational. We'll bring them batteries and socks, those are the kind of practical things they've asked for. But building a relationship with them, getting to know them, hear their story, what they're struggling with, what they're going through, praying for them, whenever we can, helping them to get out of that situation.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of the primary things we've been doing for the last 10 years. So when I say that I'm a former pastor who abandoned the pulpit to follow Jesus, that's kind of what I mean.
Sure,
I think my mentality when I was serving in traditional churches like that, not that it was bad. I grew a lot. It was a very good experience for the most part. But I think somebody once told me that traditional churches sometimes can be like a school that no one ever graduates from. You could be, it could be a church that you started going there when you're 9 years old. You could be 90 years old, and you're still in the same class. You're in the 101 class, and you still come to the same class every week. And no one ever taps you on the shoulder and says, you know what, brother, I think you're ready. I think you could start putting into practice, some of the things you've learned. And so for me,
one of your criticisms of the traditional model is that you just didn't see people really growing in becoming disciples. Would that be sort of the concern in a nutshell?
Oh yeah, I think the traditional church, has done a wonderful job of making converts, but a really horrible job of making disciples. And in other words, a disciple is someone who is not only themselves following Jesus on a daily basis, they're also helping others follow Jesus on a daily basis. So disciples make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the traditional institutional system, you have pastors who create people who follow them, depend on them.
Yeah, yeah.
But haven't done a great job of teaching them how to give it away and live it out and all that stuff. One of my favorite quotes is a guy named Fenelon, has a book called Let Go. He's like a 17th century.
I like those old guys.
He's a bishop. Oh yeah, dude, that's the rich stuff. His quote is, I'm paraphrasing him, but his quote was essentially this. These are letters he was writing to people he was discipling, and he wrote a letter to one of these guys, and he says, if you stopped learning now, you wouldn't live long enough to put into practice everything you already know about Jesus. And I think that's exactly where I was, and I think that's exactly where a lot of Christians find themselves today, that they already know so much information about Jesus, about God, about Christianity.
They're just not
There's
acting.
Not a place to say,
yeah,
when do I start walking this out, right? When do I start moving forward with this?
Yep. Yeah, I saw someone, I think on Facebook had posted something about for people that do long-term or short-term mission trips overseas, if you're not willing to tell people about Jesus here, then why would you think that you'd be willing to tell people about Jesus there, or something like that? Basically, he was just admonishing people that we need to be, that the whole world is where the harvest is to be had, and we need to be doing that stuff here too. All right, well, and I'm sure some of this stuff, your experience has led you to a number of thoughts that you've had on the relationship between Christianity and politics. And so it's led you to publish this book, Jesus Untangled, Crucifying Our Politics to Pledge Allegiance to the Lamb, which, for those that are interested in checking out, you can go to JesusUntangled.com, and you can also, the book's on Amazon and other outlets as well. We already have, Keith, we've already got a caller. We're not going to take the call quite yet, though. I guess it's someone who's already familiar with your book. I'm seeing the description here, so this person already has a question for you. So caller, Vance, thank you. We'll keep you on the line here. In the second half of the show, we'll bring you on, because first we want to sort of introduce the listeners here to what the book is about. So tell us a little bit about your concern. I mean, you've got some provocative chapter titles here, and maybe we'll just jump right into it. So, how does nationalism, and perhaps you could describe what nationalism is to us, how does nationalism hinder the gospel?
Yeah, well, and that is sort of the point of my book. So, well, I think nationalism hinders the gospel in several ways. I think that what I call entanglement with politics and nationalism, and let me just say, everything I'm writing about in this book, everything I'm pointing out in this book, it came from my own personal experience. Like, I looked in the mirror and I said, I'm someone who's entangled. I'm someone who, frankly, had a very hard time separating my faith from my politics to the point where I didn't know where one ended and the other began. And so I recognized first in myself these struggles, right? And so here's where I think nationalism can be a problem. I think that when we are more American than Christian, and I think that's part of the struggle for American Christians, is that we're more American than Christian, and the problem with that is that you can't convert a culture if that culture has already converted you. And I think that's, I mean, to use another really kind of lame analogy, Neo cannot save anybody else from the Matrix until he first gets unplugged from the Matrix. And then from outside the Matrix, he can jack back in and help people understand, how to get out. But as long as he's still in it, he can't help people get out of it. And I think part of what here's let me just go straight to the heart of it. I think that I get it. I get it. Most of my life, I would have responded to this message 10 years ago to my own book. If I had read this book 10 years ago and not written it, I would have said, well, what's wrong with being patriotic? What's wrong with being a nationalist? Why can't I do both? Why can't I do both? Right? And I would agree with that idea if following Jesus and following politics or being patriotic were the same thing. If those two agendas were equal. In other words, if both Jesus and his kingdom and America and the American empire or the American government or country, if they're both headed north, if they're both going the same direction, well, then of course I can do both, right? I can just straddle the line, walk the fence, and I can do both because they're both going in the same direction. But my conviction has become, and I believe this is borne out scripturally as well as just things that we see about how the church was in the first century and the second century. What I see is that the message of the gospel is that Jesus is going a different direction. That Jesus shows up on the scene and doesn't say, hey, I see the direction you're going. Let me just slap a cross on that and Christianize it, and we'll just keep going the way we've been going. But that Jesus shows up and says, you know what, guys, that's the wrong way. I've got a better way. I have a different plan. I have another, his kingdom. I have another agenda. I have another way to make the world a better place. And so I believe Jesus is headed due north. And I would say that the ways of the world, and I think that following nationalism and politics and all those kinds of things, is headed south. And I don't think it's possible for us to go north and south at the same time. If Jesus is headed a different direction, again, if you try to go north and south at the same time, you're going to walk in circles or you're going to be torn in half. And so, again, that's my conviction. And I believe, again, that's come out of something where I've seen it in my own life, or I've recognized that, you know what, maybe I am more of an American than I am a follower of Jesus, because there are differences. There are. It's not congruent as much as we might think it is.
Yeah.
And I think there's also, I don't want to dominate too much here because I know you have questions as well, but I want to make sure we do get into the reasons why I think it matters.
Sure.
Why that entanglement is dangerous. But go ahead if you have another question.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I think at the very least I would agree with you, I think to a degree, that for some people, at least, in terms of American Christianity, for some people, Americanism is their religion. And even though they call themselves Christian, they may even go to church on Sundays, it's clear that their faith is not in Jesus, but their faith is in country. And if only their party were leading the way, then we would be saved.
Right.
So I think for some people,
In other words, it's sort of like saying, yes, what would make, what we need right now The world is screwed up. Our nation is really jacked up. You know what we need? I got a great idea. You know what we need? A better politician. If we could just find the perfect politician, that guy will fix everything.
Right,
and
right.
I'm telling you, man, I'm old enough. I'm 50 years old. Okay, I voted straight ticket Republican from the minute I was old enough, eligible to vote, my entire life. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over
Right.
again, expecting a different result.
Outcome. Yeah.
And to me, yes, that to me is insanity. I've lived long enough to say, I'm looking at this thing, and I don't think, I understand that the heart of saying I want to be involved in politics is because I want to make the world, I want to make my world and my society, my community, and my neighborhood, I want to make it a better place.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think politics is really the best way to do that. Not only is it not the best way to do that, it is not the way that Jesus showed us to do that. He has something called the gospel.
Yeah, it's very relevant that you've brought this up because for those that are following the national conversation, if you will, the Republican Party has recently just tried to pass a new health care bill, which the acronym is the AHCA. And interestingly enough, for years, the Republican Party has talked about repealing Obamacare. And this and a number of folks, and those that have listened to the podcast long enough know where my positions lay. They know that. So my concern is that this bill doesn't do that. And so ultimately the bill didn't have enough votes, so it wasn't put on the floor to be voted on because the party realized that it would lose. But it's fascinating here, Keith. You've talked about how you've voted one way your whole life and realized nothing's changing. I mean, I get that impression as well. So I'm sympathetic to that observation that no matter if it's our party we vote for, it doesn't seem that change really happens. And but more importantly than that, it's that we need to be followers of Jesus, and maybe that's where we see the better change, right? We want to change people's hearts. So that's that's really what Jesus wants us to do. He doesn't want us to vote a certain way. You can't just be a Christian on election day. You've got to be a Christian on all those other days. So tell us a little bit more about your observation there about how important it is that we change people's hearts more so than the political status quo.
Yeah, well, absolutely, man. I mean, this is the thing, especially as I was going through my own journey and doing research and stuff for the book, what I realized is that Jesus is a smart guy. And when he showed up and he saw how screwed up things were, how much a mess we had made of things, what he gave us was the perfectly designed system. It's like this perfectly designed virus or something that is designed to not only, first of all, to transform you and me to begin with. He makes us into people who are like him, who love like him and serve like him and think like him and act like him, and that's the goal. We're supposed to be transformed into the image of Christ ourselves, but then that same gospel is able to transform my family and my neighbors and my community. And then this is the way we change the world. And I promise you, if politics could get their hands on something like that, they would trade with the church in a heartbeat. Oh, you want the power? Here, tell you what, you give us that, and we'll give you the power to pass laws. You can create legislation to pass laws, because that's all they can do. But they don't, like you said, that doesn't change anyone's heart. I can pass any law I want, right? I can pass a law as simple as something that says everybody must go and buy a dog. And everyone will go out and buy dogs, but you're not turning people into dog lovers. They may still hate that dog, But they got a dog one way or the other. But you've not made people into dog lovers or whatever. So, but the gospel has the power and the ability to transform us and our world into people who are more like Jesus. That is his plan. Mm-hmm. And my concern, my fear is that when we get entangled, just like you said, Kurt, when we get entangled with our politics, we start to feel like you said, if I just vote a certain way and stand up for certain, political ideologies and platforms and campaign things, then I've somehow accomplished something that Jesus called me to do, or I've done my part, when we've really done nothing. And in fact, as I've done many interviews and had many conversations about the book with people, and it seems like this happens all the time. Because what I'm saying is to Christians, and again, my audience is Christians, I'm saying to Christians, you know what? We need to focus ourselves not on politics, but on living out the gospel, preaching the gospel, being followers of Jesus, and going all in with Jesus and his power and ability to transform the culture, us and the culture around us. And
Sure.
but when I say that, I mean, inevitably, the response I get is, Keith, you're saying that we should do nothing. You're saying we should disengage from the culture. You're saying then that we're just going to sit back. You know, what's the famous quote? The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. You're saying do nothing. Well, no, I'm not saying do nothing, but that's what they're hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And why are they hearing when I say don't become entangled with politics? What they hear is me saying, then you're doing nothing. Well, the reason they hear that is because if I take away politics, they've got nothing. Here's a great example, and you know people like this, and I know people like this. There are Christians, I know them, and I used to be one of them, who would, at the drop of a hat, enter a 2-hour argument with a total stranger about politics. But that same person would absolutely never enter a 5-minute conversation with that same person about Jesus.
Sure. Yeah.
And that is part of our problem, right? Like you said, we're more passionate about our politics than we are about Jesus and about the gospel and about the kingdom. So I am not, please hear me, I am not advocating that Christians disengage from the culture, because there's no possible way to follow Jesus and live out the gospel without engaging the culture.
Right.
I mean, that is exactly what we're called to do. And not only that, by engaging the culture as followers of Jesus, by living out and sharing the gospel with people, it will have an effect. There's the promised effect that will not return void, that it will bear fruit, that apart from Jesus we can do nothing, but with him we can have this transformational impact on the whole world. This little seed that seems like nothing, and that's part of our problem. It just seems like nothing. It seems so weak.
Mm-hmm.
It seems so powerless compared to, let's say, the Oval Office or a congressional or Senate, authority, or the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
The gospel just seems nothing compared to that. But I'm telling you, Christians need to go back and have faith once again in the absolute nuclear, ginormous power and ability of that gospel to transform people from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think another way to say it, another way to express what I'm trying to say is this. I'm concerned that Christians in America are not loyal enough to their leader. I think Christians in America are not patriotic enough about their holy nation. Because according to the New Testament, our leader is Jesus. And the only holy nation on this planet is the body of Christ around the world.
Sure.
And so we need to be more passionate about following our leader, who's Jesus, and more passionate about our nation, which is the kingdom of God, which, by the way, transcends every national border and covers the planet.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what we need to have authority, right? That's what we need. That's what we need to go back to, and that's what I'm calling people into. When I say crucify our politics, it's so that we can pledge allegiance to the Lamb of God, who is the King of Kings.
Sure. Good. All right, Keith. Well, hey, we've got to cut to a break here. But when we return, I've got some more questions for you on some of the things that you said here, and I'd be interested to see how that maybe fits with some things that you said in your book. So hopefully we'll be able to flesh that out after a break from our sponsors.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Are you tired of wasting your time and money on ads that just aren't producing? What if there was an easier way to get great advertising results with tons of traffic and social engagement to your brand without wasting your time or money? Well, there is an easier way, and it's called TrafficBuffet.com, a new and easy way to generate the traffic you need through our global network of publishers, all with one click. Explode your site traffic and send tens of thousands of potential customers to your site daily. Build your brand with our social campaigns like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and more. Our dedicated account reps provide amazing support. So don't wait. Get started today. TrafficBuffet.com. Measurable results, driving success.
Join the Illinois Family Institute for a special forum, Climate Change and the Christian, with Dr. Calvin Beisner in Rockford, Arlington Heights, Orland Park, and Peoria.
The Green Movement threatens to trap the poor in poverty and rob people of property rights by touting false or exaggerated claims of eco-disaster.
Dr. Calvin Beisner is the founder of the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation. You don't want to miss his presentation on climate change and the Christian. What's true, what's not settled science, and what's our responsibility.
Now, it's true that if you love God, you will try to take good care of the earth. And I encourage you to do exactly that. But that's not gospel. That's law.
The Illinois Family Institute Climate Change and the Christian Forum is free, so bring your family and friends. Visit IllinoisFamily.org for times, dates, and locations, or call 708-781-9328.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
Thanks for sticking with us through that short break from our sponsors. If you want to learn more about how you can become a sponsor of the show, you can go to veracityhill.com and click on that tab in the menu, Patron, that Patron tab, and you can read more about how you can become a sponsor or just a regular supporter of this show. So before we get back into today's discussion on nationalism with Keith Giles, we've got a fun segment of the show. We started a couple weeks ago. I think maybe this is week 4 of doing this. At any rate, what do you meme? That is the name of this segment. And we've got 3 memes that we're looking at here just quickly today. The first one up we have is on Islam. And Chris, who's running the live stream here, has got these posted for you. And we'll throw these up on the website as well. If you're just listening on the podcast right now, so go to the website, veracityhill.com, and you can see these images. So here we've got this meme. We will punish those who criticize Islam, which is, it's clearly a Muslim who's saying that, Muslim leader. And then here we have, we will punish those who criticize Islam, and it's the Prime Minister of Canada. And so, interesting here. And these are all listeners submitted. And so I think what the person who submitted this meme, what they're wanting to point out here is that it seems that even in the free countries, there are laws being proposed to limit free speech. And to punish people that want to criticize Islam. And this person that submitted this one even gave a link to the Parliament of Canada with the text of the motion here, which is fascinating. I'll link that at the website. And so, yeah, maybe we should be concerned about free speech being limited. But, and I'm sure when we bring Keith back on here, he'll talk about how, look, there are Christians in Muslim countries, and we're still called to be followers of Jesus. So ultimately, that's what we've got to do. We've got to be a disciple of Jesus, no matter where we're at. But yes, to the person that submitted this, I would say, yeah. I mean, I still am concerned. In engaging with culture and politics, I'm concerned that we would have certain freedoms limited. And so I think, and I'm sure we'll talk to Keith here momentarily about this. I think we should be concerned about that, but not at the expense of following Jesus. All right, so number 2 here, we've got the vote. So one simply does not vote to pull out. So this meme here was submitted by someone who made this. He told me regarding Brexit this summer, when Great Britain voted to leave the EU, and it's a bit more complex than mere voting. And then he said, how relevant is this today, given the healthcare stuff this week in Congress? That it's not so easy, perhaps, than we think it might be. So, yeah, that's true. Sometimes things are harder than we expect, and voting is, in some ways a formality. There are a lot of logistics that are required. That's quite right. But nevertheless, I think voting still is important. And again, we're going to have Keith chime in on these here after this segment. So there are logistics we need to consider, but I still think we need to do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing. Lastly, we had this one submitted. This is, funny enough, even though we request submissions, we had a number of folks just send humorous ones, just funny, haha, which is great. So here's one of those. This is a picture of a baby, and it says, "Life has never given me lemons. It's given me anger issues, anxiety, serious love of alcohol, and just a dislike of stupid people." There, that's what it says. And a dislike of stupid people. So that's a humorous one with the baby having those issues. It's a play off of that phrase, if life gives you lemons, make some lemonade. Well, this person's been given a lot worse. Which, look, if I'm going to take this meme seriously, yeah, it's true. It's a testament to the fall that some people are given bad hands, if you will. And I think that the good news of the gospel is that Jesus reaches everyone in any life circumstance, whether they're suffering or whether they're the elite of this society. Jesus' message is for you. And so, so that's it for the memes. All right, so back to today's topic. We're talking about nationalism. Has patriotism gone too far? And Keith, thanks for joining us back here on the show today. So perhaps you were listening in on the memes there. What were your thoughts on some of those?
A couple of thoughts. I guess I didn't understand completely the first one about the Muslim thing. Was it just sort of like the fact that? I think. Remind me again. What was it?
Yeah, I think so. It was an image of a Muslim leader and the Prime Minister of Canada, and each one had there that, if you criticize Islam, we'll punish you. So I think the concern there is that free speech is being infringed upon from people being able to publicly criticize Islam.
Right. I don't know. I guess I look at it again from the standpoint of, for me, I look at it now more than ever as when I say we, what do I mean? And when I say we, what I mean now only is the body of Christ. What I used to mean, when I said we, I meant America, or when I said we, I meant, maybe my denomination or whatever. But now when I say we, I just mean me and my brothers and sisters in the church. So I think this we and them, this kind of, and the book talks about this tribalism, a tribal mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we, and speaking when I say we, I mean the body of Christ, I don't think Christians need to criticize Islam. I don't think we're called to criticize Islam. I think we're called to love everyone, whether they're Buddhist or Muslim or whatever. But this tribalism, this is why politics and in the church is dangerous, is because it creates an us-them within the body of Christ. So now brothers and sisters in the same church, in the same family of God, see each other as us or them, and create this division, right? But the thing about this tribalism and the thing about this us-them mentality that's also, I've noticed, is that it's really easy to talk about this group of people in a very broad way and say all liberals are stupid and all Muslims want to cut my throat.
Sure, yeah,
and all gay people. But the truth, I can only say that if I've never met anybody and I don't have a friend who I can say their name and I've been to their house and I know their kids' names. Once I have an actual human being that I can connect to that group,
right?
Then I can't tolerate any more saying all
the stereotypes,
people are lazy.
Using those labels.
I know. You haven't met my friends. These people are the most hardworking people I've ever met, or whatever. So that's partly why I think this tribalism mentality, this us-them mentality, is dangerous in general. But it's really dangerous in the church. And
so let me ask,
one of the ways it creates that.
So in terms of sort of discriminating, and I use that term broadly, I mean just as a demarcating. You would say that we could still have debates with Muslims, like a formal civil debate, or give, say, if I wanted to write a magazine article about why I thought Islam was even a false religion. I mean, that would be okay, right?
It might be okay. I'm not sure how productive it would be. I mean, it depends on what your goal is. I don't think an article like that would a Muslim wouldn't read that and say, "Oh, good, I think I'm going to be a Christian now." You know,
well, maybe if it was written in the right way,
effective.
maybe if it was written in the right way where you are trying to appeal to that audience, you would talk about having good criteria for why we should believe certain, positions.
Well, but can I suggest something?
Sure.
Again, I suggest something, and my book doesn't talk about this, but since we're on this issue, I just real quick wanted to say that.
Sure.
Because again, I've had Muslim students who come to UCI and other universities here. I've had them in our church. They've been to our church, and I've had lunch with them and dinner with them and hung out with them. And something that I learned about talking to Muslims is, rather than talking about how we're right and they're wrong, I think if we make it about which of us is right and which of us is wrong, we're not going to get very far. But here's something that blew my mind that is amazing that I think most Christians don't know. I did not know this. That Muhammad is only mentioned by name 4 times in the Quran, but that Jesus is mentioned 25 times.
Oh, yeah.
They call him Isa. But he's, and the Quran, here are the things that the Quran teaches about Jesus.
Sure.
Again, the Quran
says he works
Jesus.
more miracles than Muhammad.
Yes, exactly. And so I think, man, you know what I mean? Can you imagine if I told you there's this guy over here and he's not a Christian, but these are the things he believes about Jesus. He believes in the virgin birth. He believes Jesus is the Word of God. He believes Jesus is the Spirit of God. He believes Jesus is the Messiah. He believes Jesus created life. He believes Jesus cured people. He believes that Jesus gives life to people who are dead. He can resurrect them. He believes that Jesus is alive today, is in heaven, and that Jesus is coming again to judge the world. Now, he's not a Christian, but he believes all those things. How would you go and talk to him? I hope you wouldn't walk over there and point out all the ways he's wrong. I hope you'd walk over to him and say, man, we have a lot in common. Let's talk about Jesus.
Sure,
right?
That's one method.
Adopted that as a tactic. That's a better tactic. I think you have more hope of making some progress if we focus on what we have in common. Because let me tell you, we got way more in common with on that level about Jesus than we do with Jewish people. Jewish people don't accept any of those things about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so
it may just depend on
an opportunity.
Yeah, it may just depend on one's audience.
We're
though. I mean, if you're talking, there's a Muslim at the lunch table. That's probably a better method. But the format might vary. And I think, at least as it concerns this meme, talking about sort of discrimination, it would be publicly, if there's a public forum, there's concern there. But so we've got to move along, and we had this caller patiently waiting, and so let's see. He wants to comment on the current concerning state of Christian entanglement in politics. So, Bob, thanks for calling in the show today. What's your comment?
Well, first of all, thanks for assuming that I've been patient. That's very polite of you. My comment is that there's no avoiding the entanglement. I've been around for an awful lot of this, and I grew up in the church, got away from the church, came back in my early 30s and spent 35 years just up to my eyebrows in the evangelical movement. Found that, and by the way, both times that I've left the church, the first time I left the church, I was 15 years old, and a funny-talking Catholic guy from Massachusetts ran for president, and my Baptist church prayed against him, not because they disagreed with him politically,
but because he was a Catholic.
Because he was a Catholic.
Yep, you're talking about JFK, of course. Yeah.
You're right. I'm a 15-year-old South Missouri kid. I didn't know what bigot meant, but I sensed the issue and was completely turned off by it. And that, and no doubt the other temptations of being a 15-year-old, I got away from the church. And I was away until I was 32 years old, so I was away a long time. And then I had a really profound personal experience, that brought me. And the only thing I knew as a response to that experience, by the way, was to get back into church, because I knew God had done something in my life and had made a change. And my only known venue for that was to get back to the institutional church. So I did that. And about 10 years ago, my wife, who is a quiet-spoken, not aggressive individual, whose daddy was raised her as on the very conservative side, started saying, we can't buy into where the evangelical church is going politically anymore. And I would correct her. I say, you can't talk that way. You're your daddy's daughter. But as we stood back and looked, and this is not a Republican-Democrat thing. I don't mean it at all. I just mean that what I saw spiritually, what was happening, and then I'd go to, in 08, I would go to morning prayer meetings, early morning prayer meetings in my church, and I heard exactly the same spirit there that I heard when I was 15 years old. And so I have been, call it driven, call it excused, call it whatever you want to. I have left the institutional church twice in my life, in reality, because of politics. And I'm not political. I'm a registered independent. I do vote, but I absolutely vote for the moral or the concept. I don't vote the party line. I never have.
Sure.
And I'm not deeply political. So I don't know how we can untangle the two, because we live in it. And Jesus said, "Abide till I come." What does that mean? Does that mean be involved in where we are, or does it mean spiritualize where we are and not look at the realities of where we are? By the way, hi Keith. You and I are longtime friends on Facebook. It's good to hear your voice.
Hey man,
Keith, why don't I'll let you take Bob's comment first.
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all, I want to acknowledge his comment, his pessimism that we can't avoid it. I understand on one level, maybe locally where you live, you can't find a church that doesn't have one side or other of the coin, one polarity of the other political conversation. And I think it's true probably across America, which is again why I wrote the book. But I would say it is possible. I think though it's going to take individual Christians holding firm to the idea that we don't want, when we come together as the body of Christ, what we don't want is politics. We want Jesus. And this is one of the reasons why I think this issue is so important. I would say also, if you haven't read my book, Bob, please read my book, because I think this is why this is so important. It's why I wrote the book. But he's exactly right. There is especially something called the nuns and the duns. And I don't know if you have addressed this on your show, but there's a trend happening in the church in America right now, and they're called the duns, where it's a younger generation of people who have said they're done. They grew up in the church. They were even maybe leadership in the church, but they're checking out of evangelical Christian church. And one of the main reasons that they give is that they're tired of hearing sermons about everything except Jesus. They're hearing sermons about politics or about political issues. It's more about what we're against than who we're for. And we're losing thousands and even millions of younger generation of people. And so let me tell you, we need to prioritize this issue of entanglement, or we're going to lose an entire generation. So the church is getting older, and that means the younger people are checking out. And it's not because they don't want Jesus. They desperately want Jesus. I started 2 years ago, before I wrote the book, I started a group on Meetup called Jesus Without Religion or Politics. And I was running 2 meetings concurrently, 2 meetings a week, with people who just wanted.
Sure.
They were like, yes, I want Jesus. I don't want denominational baggage. I don't want arguments about who's right and who's wrong on this issue or that issue. I don't want to hear about the political stuff. Can I just get with other people who just want to focus on Jesus? Yeah. And there is a hunger and a desire for people that is exactly what they want. Yes, there are a lot of churches who haven't realized that what they're doing yet. They're sort of tone deaf about the fact that they are turning people away. Now, they're attracting lots of people that agree with them on those issues, but the problem is those are a lot of older people who seem to care about those things much more than a younger generation does.
Yeah, and I might have a slightly different take on analyzing the statistics, but certainly I think, Keith, you're right that there is a trend for some people out there, and I think those people definitely need to be reached, and we need to ask ourselves what is the way to reach them. So now, Bob, if I may, to your comment, I would say that maybe it's the case that we should hold our view of politics loosely. But I still think we still need to have some engagement. I still think we should vote with conviction regarding how we think Jesus taught on a number of ethical issues. But yeah, maybe the way that's done in traditional church isn't all that appealing. Maybe it's the style. Maybe, for example, like instead of from the pulpit, that could be left towards like an educational type class for an open discussion.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Kurt, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a 72-year-old. I'll be 72 years old next week, and I'm a done. And it's very interesting. I spent 5 years up until about a year ago. I spent 5 years every Monday night at one of the most popular bars, brew pubs in Kansas City, meeting with people in the age bracket you're talking about, and Keith's exactly right. Nobody's giving up on Jesus here. I mean, how could nobody's giving up on Jesus. I have a blog, and our motto when we started the blog 5.5 years ago, we decided to make it sound religious, so we sort of did a little Latin thing on it. Sans religio bovinus extremis. Yeah. And you can take that apart. What they're against is for lack of a better term, is the BS. And I don't think we need to hold our politics loosely. I think we absolutely need to be involved in our community. But I think the thing that we can do, when this election came around, I made a decision. I'm a fairly highly read blog, and I'm on some pages and some streams with some pretty strong folks. And I made a decision to step back and not directly address politics by name. And I have some strong beliefs about what's happened in the last year or two. But I decided that if I did that, I would initiate a wall being built that would not allow me to interact with people on a thoughtful basis. Sure. We have a tendency for our eyes to glaze over when somebody directly speaks against something that we believe in or we have a passion about. And interestingly enough, I don't think Jesus ever did that. I don't read any of the red letters that show Jesus getting in somebody's face and saying you're this, you're that, except of course the most religious, and he just had no tolerance for them at all. But what I see him doing is interacting with people on their own level. Woman, where is your accuser? A blog post I wrote now on was a Samaritan saved. I mean, we know nothing about his religious background. We don't know if he preaching praying a sinner's prayer. We know he was Judishly unacceptable. He was religiously unacceptable. Sure. We don't even know his name. Was he saved? You know, so we're looking at all these people around, and I love what Keith said earlier about the Quran. I didn't know that either. Yeah. But I look at the Muslim friends that I have, and frankly, I look at the quote agnostic friends that I have, and I see consistently greater examples of the red letter Jesus that I've grown to love over my many decades of life. I can see consistently more reflection there than I do in the decades that I spent in the church. And I'm sorry about that, but it's a fact. Sure, yeah. Well, and you know, many of us have different experiences, and my own experience has been that I actually like to talk about politics with people, and I think that it helps when people talk about that because it's typically taboo. But when people can talk about politics in a civil way, I think that can be beneficial and can help relationships because I'm friends with – there are people at my church that are on the opposite end of the spectrum, and I don't just mean Democrat or Republican. I mean, say, Federalist or Anti-Federalist or Socialist or Capitalist. And so I'm friends with people that hold very different perspectives than me, and I think even talking about the issues helps our relationship. It's a good way of relating to one another. Bob, hey, I want to thank you. Yeah, Bob, we've got to cut you off here because the show's coming to a close. But thanks so much for calling in to the show today. One more very short comment. Yeah, Bob, go ahead. If you can keep it short. Yeah, I have found that it's absolutely amazing how many of these things you can speak of, not ever saying anything political, just quoting the words of Jesus. It's absolutely astounding how many, and you provoke people to think, not inside the political box, but in the greater worldview box. Sure. And that, in my opinion, is what will change them. Keith, good to hear your voice. Kurt, thanks for having me on. Of course. Thanks for calling in. My pleasure. So, Keith, yeah, I would say, yeah, for what Bob's talking about there in terms of having using the words of Jesus, that does a great good in reaching people, and it goes beyond the political issues. And so I think ultimately that's right. Yeah. But Keith, what would you say? So, for example, Jesus, did interact with the Pharisees, and in his day, while it was not the perfect perspective, I mean, Jesus was in a theocratic society, Yeah. So in that sense, it was tied, the religious beliefs with the legal, doctrine, the law. So what would you say then in terms of how Jesus interacts with, Jesus goes into the temple and he brings about, a sort of political justice.
Yeah.
So how would you say then in terms of how Jesus interacted with politics and how he, in some instances at least, right, we see he transcends the political discourse, like the coin instance where someone shows him the face of Caesar, right? He sort of transcends that debate. But in other debates, he seems to get entangled with politics. So how would you understand those types of events in his life?
Well, I think, again, I think if our 100% focus is on Jesus and following him, then yes, we might now and again bump up against something that might
calls for
be
our
called
attention.
Political or have a political. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But that's not our focus, and that's not our goal.
Sure.
And I would also say, to me, there's
Can I expand? So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you would say that getting involved in some issue from time to time might be an outworking of our Christian convictions as we become faithful disciples of Christ, but that the moment we begin to put our hope in politics, that a solution, for example, say the pro-life issue or the abortion issue. I mean, if we think that getting, to overturn Roe v. Wade would all of a sudden do the trick, right? We are totally mistaken, because there are still going to be vulnerable women out there that want to get rid of the human being inside of them, and we need to reach those people. So have I correctly understood your position?
That would be exactly right. And I talked about in the book the fact that I think it was in the 20s, in America, there was a movement of Christians that actually did drastically reduce the abortion rate in America, which at the time was per capita worse than what we have now. They actually were able to reverse that and to drastically reduce the abortion rate in America. And the way they did it was by loving people that were women who were unwed mothers, coming alongside them, helping them keep their baby, adopting their baby, watching their baby while they went and finished their education and got a job to take care of the child, and at the same time, by the way, holding the men accountable who were knocking these girls up and not being responsible.
Yeah, right.
Opening orphanages, those kinds of things. And by doing that, and again, by sharing the gospel and just being salt and light in the community, the abortion rate in America was drastically reduced. And it wasn't because somebody voted on something or passed a bill, because as you said, even if we could, and I don't think we can, but even if we could overturn Roe versus Wade, we would not stop abortions from happening in America, because that wouldn't have changed anyone's heart.
Interesting. Good. All right. Well, we've got to come to a close here, Keith. But let me say this. I mean, I'm really glad I brought you on the show today. Some of the stuff I read, brought some concerns to me, and I could see maybe that the way some phrases were said were for emphasis but that in talking to you and clearing these things up, I see that we're closer than I thought we were. So I think that's a good thing. It's always nice. Good.
Yeah. I agree.
Awesome. Well, Keith, again, thanks again for coming on the show. And if you want to check out Keith's book, it's Jesus Untangled, Crucifying Our Politics, to pledge allegiance to the Lamb. So there, people following on the live stream can check it out there. You can go to JesusUntangled.com, and you can find the various outlets where you can purchase the book. So, all right, Keith, well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, Kurt, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You got it. God bless you.
God bless you too, man.
All right, so we've got one question here from the mailbag, so let me quickly play that clip. I like how that guy says, right at the end. It's like he's just breathing a sigh of relief that music, it just makes him feel so good.
It's like he's drinking a beverage. anything but a Dr. Pepper almost.
Oh, anything but a Dr.
Anything
Pepper.
but a Dr. Pepper.
Okay, so here we have David. He submitted this question for us this week. And if you want to submit a question here for our mailbag segment, you can send me an email, kurt@veracityhill.com. You can even text it to me if you'd like. Just text the word Veracity to 555-888. So here's David's question. He says, how is it that the Kalam cosmological argument is not the God of the gaps position? So the the Kalam cosmological argument or other cosmological arguments look to the origin of the universe as evidence for God's existence. And the God of the gaps position is that, well, we just don't know something, and therefore God must have done it. And so to David here, I would say the cosmological argument looks at the evidence. It looks at what we can observe from the universe. And it makes certain inferences which lead us to the conclusion that it was God. So we have evidence and we have rational thinking in the form of either abductive or deductive arguments where we make an inference based upon the evidence. So, for example, in terms of the cosmological argument, we're looking at the entire universe and we're asking ourselves, what could possibly have existed before time, before space, and before matter to have created these things at the beginning, right, at the singularity with the Big Bang? There must have been something to get that process going. And so you give me a list of things that can be non-spatial, non-temporal, and non-materialistic. And I think at that point we're talking about God. We're talking about the creator of the universe. Now, of course, that doesn't assure the position of Christianity, but I think it gets us one step closer because you can reject Christianity and still believe that God exists. But I think that there's good evidence for thinking that Christianity is true. And of course, you wouldn't think Christianity were true if you already reject the existence of God. So at any rate, so that's how I would say that the Kalam or any general cosmological arguments, of which there are a variety, is not the same as the God of the gaps. It's not the same as saying, oh, we just don't know how this works, therefore it must have been God. Because we're making a deduction about some agent that started the process and is outside of time, space, and matter. And I think there are only so few things we can think of that would qualify. In fact, I think there's only really one that fits the bill on this. Because we're talking about the edge of the boundaries of the space-time continuum. One analogy I had in a Facebook discussion was it's like playing Zelda Breath of the Wild. Chris, you'll appreciate this. It's like playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is an open-world concept. But look, there are still boundaries. You can only go so far in the game. And that's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with the space-time continuum. We are dealing with the edge. And when you're dealing at the edge, what's beyond it? Well, whatever's beyond it is not part of space-time or has material. It doesn't have matter. And so I think at that point we are talking about the divine. So thank you for submitting that question, David. And again, for those that want to send a question my way, I'd love to play that little jingle. So just email me, Kurt@veracityhill.com. If you're Facebook friends with me, I'll even take your questions that way as well. So, okay, that does it for the show today. I am grateful for the continued support of our patrons. Those are folks that just chip in a couple bucks each month to help us run. And I'm also very thankful for the partnerships that we have with our sponsors. Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, the Illinois Family Institute, Evolution 2.0, and Traffic Buffet. Thank you to the tech team today. Chris, you are stellar at what you did, and I very much appreciate having you back, given your off week last week. So thank you for that. And a special thanks to our guest, Keith Giles, author of Jesus Untangled, Crucifying Our Politics, to pledge allegiance to the Lamb. Thank you for coming on the show today and having a conversation with me about nationalism. Thank you for listening in and for striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.